You are listening to the Unslaved Podcast. Please welcome Michael Tsarian and David Whitehead.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Another edition of the Unslaved Podcast here. Happy to be here with you once again. And today we're talking about the life of the infamous Thomas Szasz, and we're talking about the myth of mental illness. And I think the title alone will leave you thinking about that for a second. But I'm going to pass the intro over to Michael. Michael, you were the first person to introduce me to Thomas Szasz. I'm not super familiar with all of his work, but I have watched a few of his interviews and some of his speeches, and incredibly profound information, a totally new way of looking at psychology and the idea of mental illness and dealing with depression and even some of the more extreme things. What was it that got you into Thomas Szasz? And maybe I'll let you introduce him to the audience today.
Well, yeah, I think I've always wanted to do something on him as a transgressive thinker. These are sort of B and C listers that most people don't know about. And even if they do know about them, they often have like it is, say, with Ayn Rand or Aleister Crowley, they're definitely transgressive thinkers. Then they get it wrong. Then they have very, very poor very poor interpretations. And Thomas Szasz is up there as a brilliant researcher. He was a libertarian. He actually was also a Randian to that extent, which is also interesting. And he had mostly dedicated his life. He wrote 30 books, and appeared in courts, appeared in universities, wide range of literature, essays, especially on behaviorism. I can't remember how I first got into him. It was a very long time ago, and I can't even recall. But I remember his article refuting, behaviorism. It was a masterpiece, and I think that's free online if you just type in his name. But being so interested myself in psychology, right, and then having spent a good part of my life studying psychology and psychoanalysis, I was always equally interested in the refutations of those paradigms as well. That's not so that you throw all of psychoanalysis out. Thomas Szasz himself was a psychiatrist, a psychologist, but there's so many perspectives. Psychology is like philosophy, a very deep subject. Every single person has a different view and perspective, and then you have the complete counter perspectives of people who say, look, watch out, there's dangers here, or watch out, this thing is off the rails, illogical or irrational, and I don't know, I think when I was looking at aspects of psychology myself, I had a vague outline of some problems with it, and then if you're reading Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre, and a few others, they have radical critiques of psychoanalysis and psychology, refusing to even use the vernacular, or, refusing to use terms like id and ego and superego. And this always used to intrigue me. Why are they doing this? Is this just for fun? Are they just playing funny buggers? What's their big beef with psychoanalysis? It seems fine to me, and I've read the Karen Horneys and I've read the Melanie Kleins, and so you get to wonder, is there any legitimacy, you see, to these counter arguments to such a apparently worthwhile subject area? And you're not going to find that amongst the Christians. We did our own podcast on Freud, and that was just based on showing how spurious the normal attacks are on him. There are definitely attacks. I have a whole appendices in my latest book on the wrongs and rights in Freud, right? There's no question that he, like any other scholar on the earth, can be criticized, can be refuted, but it's not going to be done by airheads who don't know anything about what they're talking about, or have a knee-jerk reaction, to his ideas because they're poster children for the kind of neurotics he talks about. Great, that's not going to help. But if it's an eminent man like, Thomas Szasz who's coming at it, or somebody like Jean-Paul Sartre or Martin Heidegger, you then have to take it seriously. That how could they possibly think, in terms of refuting any of this? And it's going to be on solid ground, at least I think that. And I found that out, and I agreed with a lot of it. I agreed with a lot of what they were saying. And after years of even studying Jung, you and I will definitely do, I wouldn't say Jung is a transgressive thinker, but we're definitely going to do a series on him, maybe for the members, because I've got huge, and people have read the end chapters of Disciples of Mysterium, and they know I go into a lot of critiques of Jung, which I still think are very well-founded, actually. In fact, we'll do Otto Rank next as a transgressive thinker. By the time we've gone through that, people will see more clearly why he specifically, he's a much greater thinker than, say, Thomas Szasz, and he had the deepest critiques of the Freudianism and also of Jung. He's a little bit more forgiving on Jung, but it's still his theories, Otto Rank's theories, still show some inadequacy in Jung, and I had that as well. So I was just very, very happy with all the questions I had. You see, to suddenly find out here's a Thomas Szasz who's written 30 books, and then this Otto Rank, who's written dozens of books on alternative perspectives on consciousness, which either can stand alone, and you can take them as just standalone. They don't need to be rivaling any other school. Standalone theories, which are brilliant. And I present a lot of Otto Rank's teachings in Schelling, the book on Schelling and Understanding German Idealism, because this is all part of continental thought, right? Or you can take these people's vision, like we'll do today, as refutations. They're not just based on that. They're so much more than that, but you can take them as refutations of other paradigms that became more popular, that are much more materialistic in a sense, you see? And so there's multiple usages of these people's work, and we'll look at an overview today in this podcast, but the general theory, though, which is what's helpful to everyone else who may be caught up in big pharma and taking meds, and somebody in their family has schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder and all of these kinds of things. I think the topical aspect of why Thomas Szasz is very important is because he critiques all of that. He critiques it on two levels. One is he's trying to show you the chicanery of big pharma and of the whole psychiatric movement. It's just built on lies. It's built on nothing but conversation, which has been medicalized. And it's also based on malingering and moral deviancy, as opposed to what is then relabeled mental illness. So the title, but again, to really nail it, if you go to the first slide, you see that I've titled this specific one, the myth of mental illness, after his book. But I've subtitled this podcast Victimhood Analyzed, because now we're talking about a theme that you and I have discussed a lot, and we'll continue to discuss when we talk about people like Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden, which is the whole concept of self-esteem, which is lacking in our society, which is real selfhood, as opposed to narcissism, as opposed to personas and pseudo-selves, right? There's a true, authentic, imperial self that plays almost no role in any corner of any world view, except in those who are 100% up to speed with, the Ayn Rands and the Nathaniel Brandens and people of that ilk, say the old philosopher Max Stirner, or aspects of Nietzsche or Kierkegaard, right? Where the self is championed. Well, that is what's really missing. So when we're talking about Thomas Szasz or any of the other people we're talking about, I'm really using their work as a kind of a, stepping up through the gears to introduce people to the concept of selfhood in ways that they can understand and grasp, so that we're not just coming at it as pure philosophy or pure personalism, which my books are about. That's a bit of a, sort of a large mouth, bite to take for a lot of people. It's better to show people how the lack of selfhood is in our world, how much narcissism plays a role, and how little selfhood plays a role. I think people are familiar with that. They'll be more familiar with the fact that, my God, everything you describe, I see how, and we did this successfully in Path of the Fool as well. So I prefer to use these scholars as well to start showing, that aspect. And I'll have a concluding remarks to sum up later on about what I mean about that, because you're not going to understand personalism as a sort of a diagram or explanation. It's totally apophatic. You come to what that is by realizing its absence. You come to understand what you are by realizing what you're not.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to do this kind of show. And you were talking about the idea of victimhood, where we have an entire culture of victimhood. Like, that's really what seems to be permeating everywhere, where you've got all these social justice warriors. On the anniversary, did you hear this stuff about people screaming at the sky in protest to the president? And that's what it is now, is like, let's not formulate an argument. Let's just scream at the sky. Let's just go out and blow things up. Let's ban people from speaking at universities if they don't agree with us. Let's just try to find. Let's create a bunch of villains, and just whine about it. And I mean, it's just incredible that instead of addressing it and bringing an argument and looking for solutions, the mentality is pointing fingers, passing the buck, not taking on self-responsibility. Which, if you do study the people like Nathaniel Branden and the great thinkers on this, they're there to tell you, no, that the self-responsibility is what empowers you. It's that concept of becoming a victor in your life, creating your life, and not seeing everything as something happening to you, and creating a victim-like mentality. I see it all over the place. I'm sure everybody listening right now can think of their examples, but very good timing to talk about this. And another point I wanted to bring up as you were doing the intro, Michael, was when you're looking at different people's work, like we're looking at Freud and Jung and Thomas Szasz and all these people, one thing that tends to happen is that people automatically want a champion. So they want you to say, well, Freud was the man and everything he said was spot on, and that's the guy you got to follow. But our process here on Unslaved has always been, and your work has always been, no, we need to study the great minds that went on the journey of trying to discover the truth about these subjects. So whether they found everything to be true or not, whether everything they came out in their theories was bang on or not, their work is very important because these are brilliant, genius level people that spent their life focusing on their work, researching, doing tests, writing books, getting criticism, all of that. And that was what made them special, and that's what made them important. So whether you agree 100% with the way Freud looked at it, or Jung, or Thomas Szasz, or us, or anybody, the key is that it's important to look at all of the work. That way you've got all these cards on the table, and you can start analyzing where you think the truth might lie. And that's what this is. It's a process of discovery. It's not like, hey, we've got it nailed because we've got this guy featured on the show. And like I remember when we did the Crowley show, people are like, oh, what are you, like a super champion of Crowley? It's like, no, we're trying to show you brilliant work. And it doesn't mean we agree with everything, but it means we need to talk about this because there was a lot of very important things said. Certain thinkers of the past, they've changed history, like thinking of Nietzsche. Like, I don't agree with everything Nietzsche stood for, but there's a lot of stuff he brought out that nobody else did, and it's super important and very relevant, So I think that's one thing I wanted to clear up for people is that, and I agree with you, Michael, that we're here to take a study of this and then determine, based on the empirical evidence around us, what the truth is, right?
Yeah, and that was always axiomatic, to people in previous centuries. Today, we always have to disclaim it, that just because we're looking at some of the nice stuff in Crowley or good, positive stuff, or in somebody or other, we have to disclaim it and say, I'm not, completely in agreement with everything. It's ludicrous for one have to say that, but in this world of liberalism, they claim to be into diversity and multiculturalism, all right, but they penalize you for a word out of place, so this is the kind of extraordinary sick world that we're in. And it's the same with Thomas Szasz. He's a little bit too left wing for me, but his work is priceless in other areas, and I'm not by all means in agreement with everything Ayn Rand said or Crowley. Crowley wrote some atrocious literature as well as some beautiful stuff. He was trying to be a pioneer in early erotica, I think, just to make money, because he was so broke, right? And his attempt at his fiction novels is a travesty. They're horrific. But just because of that, you don't then throw out a lot of this other work that on better days, when he wasn't on heroin, or when he was a younger man or whatever. There's some really gems there. And it's absolutely preposterous to condemn somebody out of hand like that, because some of the greatest writers we've known, like D.H. Lawrence and others out there, Dylan Thomas, who died of as a raving alcoholic, and others, these are accepted names. There's no controversy surrounding any of those people, and yet they also have dark periods of their life. So to single out the people we talk about, focus in on something negative in their life, and then say, there you go, he must have been a Satanist, he must have been an evil man, when you don't know the first thing about anything he spoke of, is absolutely spurious. And I don't deal with people like that. I don't have any conversation with people like that. They can think in what they want, and we will deal with rational, conscientious people who don't put right wing, left wing, any of those are all secondary when you come to great thought. If history is the repository of the truth, then when you come at it, you have to be shoeless. It's like coming into the Holy of Holies. You've got to take your shoes off and bracket for a while these other divisions, of the person's personal life, so to speak.